Hey everybody, Riot Morton, Riot Kent back again, and this time it's a big one. It is Dragonlands. We are here, the 7th TFT set, and we're here for the PBE rundown. Kent, how you doing today?
And I'm excited. I'm always here for the rundowns, talking about live changes, tuning numbers here and there. But now I get to be here for this exciting new launch of a bunch of new content. Super hyped.
Yep. Speaking of which, Kent and I, as kind of like the live team, get to be on these videos. But I do want to call out the real heroes of this set. People like our set lead, Julie Paulo, Witty, Sam, Mindy, a bunch of the other designers who helped out, Brad, Sloan, Skip, and that's just designers. We've also got the engineering team, the art team, our product leads, QA, there's a bunch of others. It's a big team. It's not just Kent and I. So if you guys enjoy anything about Dragonlands, please make sure to tell those people how awesome a job they did. They're the real heroes. We just kind of get to present their work, so.
Yeah, definitely. They are working super hard, creating like really cool things that you guys will all hopefully see soon on PBE. But yeah, just definitely if you see them around, they've definitely been like working their asses off to bring you Dragonlands, and it's going to be exciting.
Yep. All right. So with that, we have a lot to get into. We're going to try to go fast. Now, the purpose of this video is it's supposed to be kind of a light introduction. We're not going to like tell you every little detail and every like trick to the set. This is just a welcome. If you catch my stream on the weekend, I'm going to do a really big deep dive if that's what you're into. But otherwise, this should introduce you to all the crazy stuff that's coming to Dragonlands. There's a lot of slides in here. We have a lot to go over. So yeah, shall we dive right in?
Let's go.
All right, let's start off with all the new traits. Starting with the origins. I'm going to read them off. Kent, you can add anything that I may have missed or anything interesting, and let's get going. All right, Ragewing. Ragewing is an interesting vertical in that the champions don't have a mana bar, they have a rage bar. And what happens is every time they auto attack, they gain 15 rage instead of 10 mana, but they cannot gain rage by taking damage. So it's very different than mana in that regard. You need them to auto attack to get that rage. When they do, they enter enraged mode for 4 seconds. They gain some attack speed, and if you've got the trait active, some Omnivamp as well. So kind of a unique trait where they enter this enraged mode. Jade is an interesting one that can be either a splash or a vertical. But every time you activate it, you get a statue, a Jade Idol. Kind of acts like a target dummy that buffs anyone touching the target dummy. And it gives them healing, regen, and attack speed. The more of them you have, the more powerful the buff is. The buff doesn't stack, so there's some interesting positioning puzzles there. But otherwise, Jade is also our first 12-piece vertical. If you can hit that, you can see the healing spikes from 10 to 25. Pretty nutty. Astral. Astral is our reroll comp of the set. If you like rerolling, this is the comp for you. Every 5th shop will give you an Astral shop. It'll like glow. You'll even see it. Looks pretty cool. And you'll get a bunch of Astral champions in it, which will help you 3-star your champions. You also get an Astral orb that'll give you back some gold, so you can keep on rerolling. And then if you go to 6 and 9 Astral, those orbs get even better. They can even start dropping items. That feels really good. So, and then they get a little extra AP on top. And then finally, Shimmer Scale, one of my personal favorites. This is our economy trait of the set. And it's not like Fortune or Mercenary, where it's all about losing, or even Draconic. The way this one works is the higher you are in Shimmer Scale, you get access to these items that have been crafted from the Shimmer Scales, these Shimmer Scale items. And each of these items is unique in that they are kind of powered by your gold sometimes, but can also generate more gold. And so there's this interesting tension of what to do with your gold. Do you keep your items powerful? Do you start trying to generate more? And then, of course, if you can manage 9 Shimmer Scale, which is tough, you get access to the Crown of Champions, which I won't spoil, but it's a pretty crazy item.
Yeah, I remember I was in the office. Sam, who was working on Shimmer Scale, one of our designers, was working with Mort on what to do with Shimmer Scale 9. I heard what the idea was. I'm just like, huh? Like, what are we gonna do? I'm not gonna spoil it, but when you all see this on PBE, you'll be like, how is this balanced? Other than that, Ragewing, super interesting trait because it takes the blue mana bar, turns it to red. And as Mort said, you can't gain mana from taking damage, so it becomes a really interesting emblem. You think about like, how can I make this work really well? You gain 15 mana for attack, which means you get to cast more often if you're not banking on taking damage. So think about a unit that like has a longer channel time, or something that can has like a spell that's like would use an enraged duration really well. So if you think about that really a lot, it's a really interesting emblem to build.
Yep. Cool. Next up, we have Whispers. Whispers is basically you get built-in static shiv and last whisper, so you get that armor and MR shred, which feels pretty good. And in addition, they stack their AD and AP the more they attack. So these champions, the longer the fight goes, the more deadly they become. So that's a pretty cool trait. And they can empower the team. So it's actually kind of a nice splash too. If you just, let's say you didn't have time to build a shiv or last whisper, throw in 2 whispers. Those champions will do the shredding for you. That can feel really good. Revel is an interesting one. It's a 2/3/4/5, and after dealing damage with an ability, they launch a Firecracker. Now, these champions' abilities don't fire that often, so there's nothing too crazy there. But I will tell you, if you can get a Revel emblem out of, say, a Tome of Traits or an Augment, whew, does some pretty crazy stuff. Scale Scorn is kind of the anti-dragon trait of the set, and we'll talk about dragons a little later. But if you don't have a dragon on your team, because that's the thing, you need to not have a dragon on your team for this trait to even work, they deal bonus damage, and they also take reduced damage from things over 2200 health. So these champions can do a lot, and we'll talk about them a little later, but it's a pretty cool non-dragon vertical you can run. And then finally, Trainer is sort of our summoner one this time. But what's interesting about this one is you want to get it online early, and it starts off very weak. Little dragon named Namzi, not very strong. But every turn, your trainers will feed him a snack. If you're a 1-star, they'll feed him 1 snack, 2-star, 2 snacks, etc. And as you get more snacks, Namzi will level up. So as you run them in the later game, he can get really big. He can get all the way up to 4-star. And so you can get a big Namzi that in the late game is really powerful. And then if you want to run the 3-piece or the 2-piece, you can. Pretty creative trait. Or you can even try reroll Trainer and try to get them all 3-star and accelerate that 4-star Namzi.
Yeah, Namzi is very cute. One of my personal favorites is Revel, just super, super transformative emblem. Not going to spoil, who it's good on, but if you just build the emblem, think about, which other units are can like launch a lot of spells, basically, or deal a lot of spell damage, maybe something AoE. You can launch a lot of fireworks, and just watching those fly all over the map, like, it's really fun. Another thing, just Scale Scorn, Revel Trainer, you look at these, there's no dragons here. I know you can't recognize the splashes yet, but basically there's no dragons. We're not expecting dragons to be like in every single comp, and kind of Scale Scorn like hints towards that. So you can build comps that don't have dragons in it.
Yep. Finally, we have Guild and Tempest. Guild is probably one of my favorite traits of all time, because the way this one works is it's basically build your own trait. And so every champion in Guild, including the emblem, provides a special bonus. So for example, if you have Sejuani, it's health, twitch, attack speed, etc. The more of the Guild you have, the bigger the bonus. So for example, if you throw a Sejuani into your comp, everyone gets 100 health. Cool. If you throw a Sejuani and twitch into your comp, everyone gets 120 health and 12% attack speed. So it's this really cool flexible trait. And then the guild members themselves get double of that. So if you want to run a very big vertical guild comp, you get all the bonuses and they're all doubled and 275% attack or bonus of that. So it feels really good. I think you'll be seeing a lot of guild in your games. And then finally, Tempest. Tempest is basically, it's a unique trait where it's like a lot of the power is actually built into the trait. So what happens is for the first 9 seconds, you don't really have a ton of power. You're actually kind of a little weak. But at 9 seconds, there's this big lightning strike, and it does a bunch of damage to the enemy team and stuns them for 1 second. And you can see if you can get all the way up to 8 Tempest, it takes 40% of their health, their total health, in true damage. So it can do a lot of damage, and then all the Tempest characters get a bunch of attack speed. This is also another one that if you can get an emblem for is kind of my favorite. But yeah, these are those are the origins.
Yeah, these are 2 that are, I think, some of our most splashable origins that we've ever had. Guild is like later in the game, sometimes you just want to get some mana per attack, so you put in a bard. And then Tempest is like, should I splash 2 Tempest, 4 Tempest? I can get a lot of value from like that AoE board stun, plus I get damage on top of it. These are 2 really, really good splashable traits.
All right, the last origin we have to talk about is a special one. It shouldn't surprise you if you've played a bunch of set 6, but we have an origin called Mirage. And Mirage, kind of like Mutant before it, is different every game. This time there's a bunch of different ones to talk about, but every game you'll have to check. Now the nice thing is there is actually a little Mirage thing right above your shop, so you don't have to buy a Mirage and check this time. You can just mouse over, see which one it is, no problem. But yeah, there are 7 different Mirages this time, and it's an 8-piece vertical. So to run through these real quick, if you remember Executioner, this is where you guaranteed get critical strikes, and this time also critical damage. So you can get big crits if you like, Executioner. Dawnbringer is back. This time it's just healing, so these champs will be very hard to kill. And if you go very big vertical, it'll actually proc twice and heal them twice. Spell Sword's actually a new one, but basically, every time they auto, they gain AP, which is very good on the dragon. Warlord's back. This is every time they win a combat, they gain some health and AP, and that stacks up to 5 times, so you get better as the game goes on. Duelist is a classic favorite, where the duelists move faster, and then they gain a bunch of attack speed. So if you like attack speed, this one's really cool. Electric Overcharge, where you get that electric proc every time they're hit. You can do a bunch of damage if you want to get really tanky. And then finally, Pirate's Greed, kind of a fun one here. If you were looking for another economy trait here, if it's Pirate's Greed, basically after every combat, you get a pirate chest. The more Mirage you have, the better the stuff in the chest. Very set one, very basic, but it's an interesting way to play economy 1 in 7 games.
Yeah, and as you can see, this is a 2, 4, 6, 8, which means that, the intention here is that you can play these vertically or, somewhere in the middle for a Mirage carry. You can use the emblem to create a different type of carry, or you can even just do something like, Nunu, Leona frontline with Dawnbringer to get that extra heal and like more frontline with it. So the intent here is like, it's supposed to be splashable. You can use it for different purposes, or you can just go, super tall vertical and commit to it.
Yep. Cool. All right, now with Origins, with every set, we usually like to keep them unique. But with the classes, we can do a lot of reprints, and we can mix it up here. So you're going to see a lot of familiar faces here. Assassins are back. You know what they do. They jump to the back line, gain some crit. Everyone loves them.
Dies of cringe.
Cavaliers are back. They charge quickly towards their target at the start of combat. And then when they charge, they get double the benefit. Now, the difference here is last time they were % damage reduction. This time it's armor and MR, so there's a bit more counterplay to Cavaliers this time. Should be a healthier version. Bruisers are back. Bruisers give health to themselves and a little bit less to the team. Kind of the more fun version of Brawler, if I'm being frank, so that's kind of nice to see. And then Mystic is back. Pretty basic. Gives your team MR. You need some MR against all those AP champions? Get some Mystics.
Yep, nothing to add here. All stuff we've seen before.
Yep. Cannoneers back. Very different this time, though, with the different champions. But every 5th shot fires a cannon shot that explodes and does physical damage around the target. Really good at beating grouped up comps. If people are in a group and they face Cannoneer, it hurts. It hurts a lot. Then a few new classes. We have Swift Shot. Swift Shot basically says the further... It's kind of like Sniper, but instead of damage, they gain attack speed. So the further they are away, the more attack speed they gain. But the cool thing here is the emblem gains +2 range. So if you have an emblem here, this is like better than RFC. It's almost like Radiant RFC. This can do a lot of crazy stuff if you can get one of these emblems. Guardian's an interesting one because it's based a lot of early game champions. 1-1, 2-2. So very good in the early game. But there are some end game builds that work with it as well. And the general idea is when they get low, once per combat, they'll heal themselves for half their health and an ally. And so if you have like 4 or 6 of these Guardians, your team will have a ton of shields trying to keep everyone alive by guarding them. And then finally, Evoker. Evoker is interesting because it's not like Scholar, which was team-wide. Evokers only benefit themselves, but anytime any ally casts, they gain some mana. And so if you run 4 Evoker, or even 6 Evoker if you get lucky, they'll just fuel each other mana, cast a bunch, fuel each other, and it's like rapid spell. It's crazy. So pretty cool trait there.
Yeah, and to clarify, Evoker gets it from allies and enemies. So later in the game, they kind of scale really well and gain a lot of mana, and they can like get some rapid casts off, which is really cool. And then for Swift Shot, as Mort mentioned, the emblem is super sick because it's 2 hexes. So there are some RFC users in this set, and if you can get a Swift Shot emblem on them and also build some Swift Shot, they get, not only do they get more attack speed, they also have this like long range, and it's really fun.
Let's see, Swift Shot, RFC, Olaf, right?
Yeah, and then you put them in the corner, like when RFC was infinite range, and it's basically the same thing, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
perfect.
That's the tech.
All right, continuing on, we've got a few other reprints and a few other classics here. Manser is a new one. This one's pretty wild because it's what if we put the entire budget of a trait into one champion. And the way it works is if you have at least 3 Dragon Mancer, you're going to get this item that appears on your bench that will let you choose who is the Dragon Mancer, because you can only have one. They'll grow in size, and they gain a bunch of health and AP that scales with the star level of the Dragon Mancers. So if you have all your Dragon Mancers at 2-star, that's a lot of health and AP on one champion. It's a trait that honestly a lot of people are going to react to, because it's like, this one champion was OP, but it's because there's so much power of a trait all put into one champion. So you can do some cool stuff with that. Shapeshifter's back. I'm so happy to see this one back. But basically there are 6 Shapeshifters. When they transform after their spell, they gain a bunch of bonus health. Really good with Warmogs. So some pretty cool stuff there. Shapeshifter's also one of the only ones that doesn't have an emblem. I think Trainer is the other one so far. Trainer and Shapeshifter don't have emblems. Mage is back. If you've never played before this and haven't seen what Mage is, Mage says they cast twice. So every time they would cast a spell, they cast twice. And this is another craftable emblem that can do some really crazy stuff. There are champions that, like, say, shield themselves and then will shield themselves twice and give themselves buff twice. Shapeshifters are especially always fun with Mage. So definitely check those out. And they also multiply their total AP, so they work really well with items like Death Cap and Archangels. So unlike Arcanist, which had the opposite problem, Mages definitely want AP items. And then finally, Warrior is a new one, where Warriors have a 25% chance on attack to increase the damage of their next attack. So if these champions have high AD or have something like a Deathblade, they can proc a bonus attack that can hit really hard. Doesn't work with abilities, only auto attacks. But kind of a cool new class.
Yeah, Warrior's really exciting because sometimes you just see those whacks and then like, boom, holy, that did a lot of damage. Another one of my personal favorites is Dragon Mancer. It's so cool to watch your unit grow large. You know, if you think back on, you know, like mechs from set 3, Cultists, you have these gigantic units. But this time it's your actual champion. And so now they get really large, they get all this extra stats, and they're like your super carry. And as Mort mentioned, you know, the damage charts are going to be kind of skewed towards this one thing, but it's because you loaded literally all of your traits power into that one thing. But, you know, super fun, lots of different variations of this comp that you can play. So, yeah.
9 Dragon Mancer Yasuo with full items next to a bunch of Zeeks and Chalices. Let's go.
Yeah, literally going to be that like thing that you fear, that meme. It's going to be that.
Yep. And then finally, we have 2 we have to talk about here that are kind of complicated. The first one is Legend. This is probably the hardest trait in the game to play, but it requires, you know, Anivia, who's a 3-cost, Volibear, who's a 3-cost, and Ornn, who's a 4-cost. And the way it works is at the start of combat, if you have all 3 Legends, they will basically consume an ally standing next to them. You can see which one it is with an indicator. And when they do, they gain 100% of their health, armor, magic resist, and 40% of their ability power. So they get stronger. And so here's another example of where you can create super units. Now, you don't have to consume them. If you put a legend by itself, it doesn't necessarily eat something. But let's say you're level 6 and you're trying to run 3 legend, and they're each consuming. You're only running 3 units. So that's why it can be pretty difficult. But I can already tell you, there are some wacky combinations you can do with the right items and the right champions eating the right allies to make some pretty crazy champions here with Legend. And then finally, Dragon, which we have to talk about. There are 7 dragons in the set. 4 of them are 8 costs, 3 of them are 10 costs. Dragons provide +3 to their marked trait. So, for example, Ao Shen provides 3 Tempest. It's always their origin, their vertical origin. They each represent one of the cool new origins. And they take 2 team slots, kind of like Colossus. They get bonus health if they're their only dragon. But if you try to run more than one, you'll lose all that. You'll lose the traits, you'll lose the health. So you can only have 1 dragon on a team realistically.
Yeah, Legend, Mort is like on point with this being one of the hardest comps to play, I think. But there's just so many different variations you can do here, and you have to think about, you know, how do I want to itemize? Do I want to itemize the sacrificed unit? Do I want to just load everything into one unit, or, you know, have all 3 sacrificed? There's just a lot of thinking involved, a lot of positioning. It's very tough to do, but if you can pull it off, you can get some like wacky stuff going. So a lot of fun. And then of course, dragons, they are like super units in themselves, but also like we don't, as mentioned earlier, we don't expect every comp to need a dragon to succeed. So there's a lot of other strategies possible. But if you do want to carry a dragon, these dragons all do really, really well with items. And yeah, they're a lot of fun.
Okay, time to talk about the champions. As always, our champion distribution hasn't changed too much, but let's just go over some of them here real quick. We'll highlight some special ones here, but one-cost champions. We've got Aatrox, Ezreal, Heimerdinger, Karma, Leona, Nidalee, Sejuani, Senna, Set, Skarner, Tahm Kench, Taric, and Vladimir. Of these, I think some highlights here is that Ezreal is a reprint of Set 6, but is AP instead of AD. So the items are going to definitely change. Things like Blue Buff, Death Cap end up being much better this time than, say, Hurricane, Last Whisper. Let's see here. Leona is very, very tanky. Sejuani is like the ultimate splash unit because of Guild. Gives her team 100 health just for running Sejuani. That can be really good. Skarner is a one cost, but honestly, kind of one of the more fun versions of Skarner we've ever had. Shields himself, gains a ton of attack speed. Very, very fun. We always used to joke that he's like the best unit in the set, even though he's really not, but yep. He's really fun. And then Senna actually has a surprising amount of power. Senna's kind of a reprint also, but again, that AoE damage from both her ult and the Cannoneer procs can really do some damage on grouped up champs. Kent, any highlights for you here?
Yeah, I want to call it Nidalee. For anyone who's played Reckoning Set 5, Nidalee, the 3 cost, turns into a cougar, goes around clawing people. Every third attack does a bunch of damage. This Nidalee is kind of similar, doesn't have the leap, is weaker, and instead of magic, she's physical, but still a lot of fun. Put some attack speed on her and just watch her go as a cougar. It's super, super fun. I think Skarner, I just want to point out, we joke about how great he is. He's so much fun. It's like, yeah, you want him, he's kind of a tank, but like, dude, put some damage items on him and watch him like go to town with that attack speed, and it's super fun also. Tahm Kench is an interesting one because he's a different version of the one cost Tahm Kench. He shields himself, gains a health shield, basically, percentage of his health. And then when people damage him, he damages them back, but it works with Revel, so it fires like a firecracker. Super fun.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Okay, on to 2 costs. We have Ashe, Braum, Gnar, Jinx, Kayn, Lilia, Nami, Kiana, Shen, Thresh, Tristana, Twitch, and Yone. Of these, some highlights for me. Braum is back. He's one of those fun ones that just has, his ability is just be tanky. So if you need a tank in the early game, Braum is going to be a great person to put things like Redemption, Warmogs, Bramble, Dragonclaw on, and just get that amazing front line. Nami has been one that in playtest people have just been like, she is crazy. She does actually her splash this time, the damage heal damage. So she heals the team and does damage, and then double cast it if you've got Mage. So that's a pretty fun one. Shen is back, has that AoE dodge. Since he's a Ragewing, usually gets off that dodge pretty easily. So very good frontline as well. Thresh is kind of the Blitzcrank of this set. Little weaker than Blitzcrank. Will always hook the corner, starts with full mana this time, so it's not a reprint of Reckoning Thresh. But doesn't pull them all the way necessarily, so a grouped champion in the corner can actually be protected. So it's not like you have to misposition for this. You can kind of just accept the stun sometimes. So those are kind of my highlights. Kent, what about you?
Yeah, we got to mention Ashe because Ashe is reprint from Set 6, the one with the big cone, but now she's AP. Very different set of traits, so she'll function a lot differently, but the same Ashe that we've seen and love kind of sometimes, not always. But then Kiana is one that like I'm super excited to see because for those of you who played Rise of the Elements Set 2, this is 3 cost Kiana, but in 2 cost form. So she's slightly weaker, and you'll see when you play with her. But she does that jump to the back that does the CC. It's like super great. Also, just Lilia, amazing carry. She goes bonk, bonk with Mage. So much fun.
Bonk, bonk indeed.
Yeah, she's like tanky and does damage, but mostly just like deals a bunch of damage. So really fun.
Yep. All right, on the 3 cost side, we have Anivia, Diana, Elise, Alawi, Lee Sin, Lulu, Nunu, Olaf, Ryze, Swain, Silas, Varus, and Volibear. All right, let's see here. Callouts for me here. Anivia, very good champion. Get a lot of AP, has built-in MR shred. So she can do a lot of AoE damage. Kind of like a better Misfortune, to be honest. Elise is this really, I'll be honest with you, can be very frustrating. Give her AP items and watch the chaos. If you don't give her AP items, she's actually pretty bad, but give her AP items. Alawi, I think a lot of people are going to be a little sad that Alawi didn't end up like the 5 cost that we previewed, but Alawi can still be a pretty good tank and does some decent damage as well. Nunu is back as a reprint that eats things deliciously. Definitely as a Cavalier this time, also runs around and eats things, which is hilarious. Olaf is like the Cho'Gath of the set in a very interesting way. Every time Olaf dies, he gains 5 permanent AD. So if you can get an early 2-1 Olaf and start stacking that AD, you can have an extra, 50 AD for free by like 4-1, which can do some pretty cool stuff. That's kind of my highlights. What about you, Kent?
Lee Sin is probably one of the most fun champions I've had. Like, I played with this set. So many different ways to play him. You can make him a tank. You can make him an AP unit. He does the thing where he kicks one unit into the backline, like the 5-cost Lee Sin, just without the knocking out of the map thing. But, does a good amount of damage, has a lot of CC, so many flexible builds with him. Great unit. Swain comes back kind of as the Shapeshifter reprint, but now as a 3-cost and now as a ranged unit. So Swain has 4 range. You put him in the back. He launches a bunch of fireballs, and it's sick. You build him more of an attack speed carry. It's a very different feel to Swain, but still, it's like he turns into this gigantic dragon, and you just watch him go, and it's really cool.
Yep. Yeah, it's very, very different. Like calling it a reprint would be a disservice. It kind of looks like a reprint, but very different build for Swain.
True. Same skin and same shapeshifter trait, but other than that, like nothing is the same.
Yep. All right, on to the 4-cost champions, or should I say 4 and 8 costs, because we have to introduce 4 of our 7 dragons here. Now, look, there's only 2 dragons in League of Legends, and we weren't okay with that. We wanted more dragons. So we had to make our own, and we made do with what we had. So you're going to see some models here that are kind of repeat. I think we'll call it out, right? There's 2 Gallios and 2 Shyvanas here, but they're different champions. We've given them names. You're going to hear about their lore later. But let's describe them here. So Deja is probably the most confusing one because Deja looks like Galio, but Deja is a backline champion that loves attack speed and AP. So put Deja in the backline, does a bunch of rapid fire attacks and shreds MR. Very powerful, very high DPS. So definitely check out Deja. Idis is our one frontline dragon, or very, very tanky frontline dragon. Kind of the solo tank you can throw into any comp. I love Idis for that reason. You throw in Idis, give them tank items. Their spell is like this AoE heal and gives attack speed, or shield and attack speed, and then heals themselves. Also gives you a Shimmer Scale item because you've got 3 Shimmer Scale now, so that's really cool. Shio is a unique one. More of a frontline melee champion, wants to be very tanky, loves things like Titan's Resolve, Hand of Justice, but every time they cast, they get really, really tanky with their like Jade armor, and then do this cool 1-2-3 combo that just does a lot of AD damage and true damage. And then finally, Siphon. Siphon is like the hybrid of Idis and Shio. Can be tanky, but also every time they cast, they do this charge, and then the chomp. That chomp is massive AD damage. We're talking like 2,000 at 2-star with some items. So it can start to one-shot enemy champions. Very scary dragon. And these are kind of the 8-cost dragons that you can expect if you want to build your team around them or even just splash them in. And then in addition, we have Corki, Hecarim, Nico, Ornn, Sona, Talon, and Xayah.
Yeah. For the dragons here, we have like a very flexible or like a wide range of different roles for this cast. There's a backline AP attack speed unit, there's a frontline tank, there's a frontline physical damage dealer, and there's a frontline like hybrid but kind of like CC unit, but also can be a carry. So whatever itemization you have, you kind of have a way to play basically a dragon in this game if you want to opt into it. If not, there's a bunch of other 4-cost carries. Xayah and Corki are great like AD carries. Talon is great like jump to the backline carry, and then you have a bunch of CC units in Ornn, Sona, Nico, and Hecarim. So really flexible in like how you want to build your comp, and you balance out CC, AD, AP, all that kind of stuff. So
yep,
yeah,
cool. And then let's talk about the legendaries. Now, as always, for the legendaries, they each get their own slides, so we can really highlight just how cool they are. And to start off, we have Bard. Bard is a bard. Bard. No, but
Bard.
seriously. Bard is probably the most splashable unit we've ever made. He's guild, which means gives your whole team mana on attack, which is a very good part of the guild build. He's Mystic. Mystic is always good in the late game. And then he's Bard. And what Bard does is every time he casts his spell, he will make a doot, because he'll start dancing and he'll make a doot. And then if you win combat, he'll start dancing, and his teammates start dancing, and they might spawn doots. And what doots do is permanently empower your shop. They can basically start to improve your shop odds. So for example, you might start seeing screenshots later where like you're level 8 and have a bard, but your 5 cost odds are 10% or 15% because you've collected a bunch of doots. So this is a really interesting champion where he can manipulate the shop odds. And then in addition, the spell is just a really good AoE stun. He throws out his ult, it stuns them, but it's not like League of Legends where like they can't be interacted with. They're literally just stunned for 2 seconds and take 20% increased damage. So this champion is just, I think it's going to be splashed in just about every comp.
Bard, freaking Bard. Bard is so cool, but we thought Witty was crazy for making Bard in set 3 where, you printed EXP, but now you print doots and you get like shop odds. This is, we've seen some really wild things, and, Bard has been tuned to a more reasonable rate, but like 100% 5 cost odds is a possible thing if you really, really can go for it. So yeah, I don't know. Bard, great unit. Bard.
Yeah, I think if you see a lot of the influencer playtest videos, you're going to see some crazy stuff where it got up to 100%, probably a little easier than intended. We're not shipping it that powerful, but yeah, it'll still be pretty cool.
Yeah, yep, super splashable unit.
Pyke, 5 cost assassin. Beware, everybody, it's a 5 cost assassin. Pyke is here with his ult, dives towards the lowest enemy and does an X. So it's actually an AoE X that does a bunch of damage and additional damage to all the enemies hit. Enemies hit suffer 50% healing reduction, so get you that anti-heal. And then if Pyke hits an enemy below 30% health, he executes them and immediately recasts. So if you ever wanted like Darius from set 4, but AoE and a 5 cost, this is the champion for you. Very powerful champion, stacks very well with AP. Remember, is also Whispers, so can get even more AD and AP if you can keep him alive. Can crit with Assassin. This champion is nutty.
Yeah, there's going to be talk about AoE Assassin hasn't learned the lesson, but we have tuning levers here because the central unit takes max damage and the other units take less damage. So we want to avoid the whole you clumped for Assassin and you entirely got deleted. That's not the plan here. Pyke is here to kill one thing, recast, kill another thing, weaken the other one so that he can continue killing. It's still going to be really cool. But yeah, he's not here to just wipe the board in one big boom, But yep. Very satisfying Pyke fantasy from League of Legends when you watch him go off multiple times.
Yep. Okay, Soraka. Soraka is actually a pretty basic 5 cost. Their passive is anytime an ally is below half health, Soraka will start getting even more mana. Kind of has that I need to heal my team thing going on here. And then when she casts, it'll be a shower of stars that will heal allies for each star that hits them. So she'll heal a bunch of the team, can power up, works really well with Jade, which is her trait, can be a very tanky trait, get very high effective health, scales well with AP. Here's the catch. Soraka is a Starcaller. And Starcaller says the first Starcaller to cast their ability during player combat heals your little legend for 2, 3, 75 health. So let's say you're at 80 health, you find a Soraka, she casts her spell, you're at 82 health now. That's pretty cool. Now, there's one other trick. Some of you may have seen some of the influencer stuff where games were going forever because a 3-star Soraka will heal for, 75. That's true. But the new thing that's been added here is excess healing. If your little legend is at 100 health, instead of healing the little legend, the star will change its direction and hit an enemy champion. So, for example, let's say you're having a Mr. 100 game, and you find an early Soraka, she can start killing enemy champions 2 at a time. And then if you hit that 3-star, she'll just wipe boards. So, pretty cool.
Yeah, at 3-star Soraka, you become an offensive Soraka, and it becomes battle Soraka, it becomes really exciting, really fun. Excited to see some videos of that.
Yep. Cool. All right, Yasuo. Yasuo is back as a 5 cost. He was a 5 cost all the way back in set 1, but is different. The way it works, very low mana cost, 25, and he'll shield himself. He will shield himself, dash through, and do some damage. Every third one, he'll do a big AoE knockup. It'll do a bunch of damage. So very good champion, scales very well with AD, uses blue buff well. I think you can actually do some cool Titans builds, Hodge, stuff like that. But what really is kind of fun here is if Yasuo ults the last enemy unit, no matter who they are, he will execute them with this really flashy, it looks like Omni Slash kind of. It's all true damage. It's really fun. But he'll execute them, and he will always win sort of those 1v1s. But it doesn't even have to be 1v1, right? It can be 4v1, and he just hits them. So, yep.
Yeah, Yasuo comes here as, he's mostly a carry, but he can also be played as like kind of as a splash frontline-ish unit because he shields himself. He also has a CC, so because of that, like you can put tanky items, Thieves Gloves, something like that, put him in your comp, and he's still pretty valuable. And he activates Mirage for you in case you want that Dawnbringer healing or that Pirate Chest, whatever it may be. So yeah, flexible-ish unit, mostly a carry, a lot of fun.
And then Zoe. Okay, so this slide doesn't do Zoe justice, but Zoe is a Spell Thief mage. I will tell you now, if you're running Zoe, you'd want to get 3 mage in. It's really important for her spells. But the way she works is she's a Spell Thief, and every turn she will grab a different spell, and every time she casts a spell, she'll grab a different one. Now, she only has 4 spells built in here, but they're all things you'll remember. She has Lux's Laser, so that big laser that does a ton of damage. She has Kale's ultimate from set 1, which is give 2 or 3 allies invulnerability and extra armor and MR for the rest of combat. She has from Galaxies Janna's Tornadoes, which is sort of a big AoE stun that also gives your team a bunch of attack speed. And then she also has Ivern's Golem that she can summon, and then if she were to cast it again and the Golem is alive, the Golem will slam down and do a bunch of damage.
Daisy!
Yeah. So what's interesting is that basically Zoe has 4 spells and will cycle through them kind of randomly, kind of crazily. And if you're running Mage, she'll cast 2. So for example, she might go Janna ult into Lux ult, or Daisy into Kale, or whatever. She can even go Lux into Lux. And you can get some big damage. Scales really well and provides a ton of utility. Zoe's another one that, like, again, as long as you can run 3 Mage, because Mage also lowers the AP, but it doesn't lower the utility. So Kale ults are still 1.5 seconds of immunity. Janna is still a bunch of attack speed. And so 3 Mage Zoe is very good in the end game.
Yeah, Zoe becomes like, you kind of need to put Mage in for her or want to put Mage in for her because of how good her spells are. But, something that you can splash and then you get to watch her not only have utility, sometimes she can just do a lot of damage. And so itemizing her is like actually really good too. Yeah, really fun champion.
Yep. All right, and then we have our 3 legendary 10-cost dragons. The first of which is Ao Shen. Ao Shen is kind of the champion that you want to get some mana items on, so things like Shojin, any way to help Ao Shen cast quicker, because once Ao Shen casts, rains a ton of lightning. Now, this is not like Xerath from Galaxies or anything like that. This is just a ton of damage, and each lightning bolt drains mana from their target. So it's a good way to kind of stop the enemy team. This is the champion that, again, if you can get it to cast, lots of damage coming out here. Feels really good here. And the thing to remember is by himself activates Tempest. So, you get Ao Shen, throw in 1 more Tempest. You've got 4 Tempest. That can be really good. Buy some time for Ao Shen to get that mana he needs. And then go big booms. So feels pretty good.
Yeah, definitely a big boom in a very different way. But it's like super hype when you watch Ao Shen go off.
Yep. Aurelian Soul, kind of another big boom mage, but in a very different way. I think Aurelian Soul really likes Evoker, because Aurelian Soul, what he does is at the start of combat, he casts a black hole, and this black hole does some damage into an area and reduces their AD by 40, so kind of an anti-AD a little bit too. But every time he casts, the size of the black hole gets bigger, and the damage gets bigger. So it's like 1x, 2x, 3x, 4x. You can get some pretty big numbers, and by like the 4th or 5th cast, it just does a ton of damage to the whole board. This is probably one of the most fun champions to just run 3 Shojins on. That's actually not the worst build. But yeah, it can do some pretty crazy stuff if you can have your front line survive long enough.
Yeah, Alishin and Aurelian Soul are both mages that are more item hungry. You want to put items on them so that they can get their casts off. And for Soul, you want to be able to stall the fight long enough so that eventually, wait till you see this black hole. But with the black hole consumes everything.
Yep. And then finally, Shyvana, I think, kind of League of Legends quintessential dragon champion. The one dragon that starts in human form, but very quickly will transform, flying up into the air, does this awesome dive bomb that stuns and does some damage. And then from there, in dragon form, every time her rage fills up, will breathe this cone of fire, this big AoE flame breath that does % health maximum damage. Now, the thing about % health is it scales really well with AP. Shyvana is a fascinating champion because you can itemize her so many different ways. I personally love like Titans and then full tank because she's also a shapeshifter, so has a ton of health. If you can get some, like maybe get a Celestial Blessing augment, you can get a bunch of healing, and Shyvana can go a long ways. I think Shyvana also works really well with Soraka. Soraka can heal her up, but Shyvana is a terror. I think if anything encompasses like fighting a dragon, it's going up against a 2-star Shyvana with full 3 items.
Yeah, I love this champion. She's so fun. Because she does the big dive bomb, she feels a lot like a tank, but you can't necessarily think of her fully as a tank because she does kind of like jump up into the air and like become untargetable, which means she'll drop aggro, but when she comes back down, she'll kind of get aggro back. But at the same time, like you kind of want to focus on that flame breath because it does so much damage. So you, like Mort said, you want to give her a Titans, maybe a Hand of Justice, maybe 3 Titans, something like that, where like she stacks up and she just like melts the enemy backline, and it's really sick.
Free hint: Shyvana Nico frontline endgame. Just saying, it's such a good frontline endgame. Cool. All right, so that is all the traits and champions. There's a lot of new content there, a lot of stuff to learn, but that's not all because we've got so much more. We're still going here. Let's talk about mechanics, shall we? All right. So, yeah. First off, some small stuff here. Nico's help has been renamed and re-iconed. You can see the icon on your screen there. It's now called the Champion Duplicator. This is one of those small things, kind of like Tactician's Ground, where we just have to accept the pain once. But the problem is, Nico, especially being a 4-cost, it was like, oh, I got a Nico. Oh, wait, what? That confusion just wasn't worth it every time Nico's in a set. We do want to use Nico in many sets, so we're just trying to avoid this once and for all. Champion Duplicator is still very green. It still very much clearly is what it is, but definitely check out that change. Every item tooltip in the game has been updated and modernized, including stat icons when appropriate, parity between base and radiant icons, and consistent language. A lot of them have been shortened as well, so that should feel really good. The Stage 5-6 PBE round will now only drop emblems if the trait is active, so no more random, like, I'm 1 out of 3 Ragewing, and then I dropped a Ragewing emblem, and I feel like I'm down an item. So no more of that. In addition, it can also drop uncraftable emblems now. So let's say if you're running 6 out of 8 Tempest, it's possible to get a Tempest emblem now, so that can be cool. So we'll talk about why this one here is, but the minimum number of components dropped from minions, Krugs, and wolves is now 5, which including carousels means the player will have a minimum of 9 components before the treasure dragon. So this is on average little less than you're used to, but you'll see why. But that's kind of the way it's going to happen there. So those will be distributed as they always are. And then the last one here is a nice quality of life one. Gold coins earned from PvE rounds are now automatically collected at the end of combat.
Yep. Champion Duplicator, same as Nico's, but we kept it really green so you kind of associate it the same way. Duplicator makes a lot of sense just naturally. And then one other thing to call out, just, gold coins earned from PvE rounds are now collected. This works really well for like Shimmer Scale items when you get gold from a Shimmer Scale item during combat, and that's why it's very relevant. But at the same time, this is also like really beneficial for accessibility. So you don't have to go around collecting all of these coins. If you can't be clicking on your phone or right clicking all the time, so gold just like comes back to you.
Yep, cool. All right, let's talk about the Treasure Dragon. The Treasure Dragon is one of the big new mechanics this set. And 4-7, which used to be the fight with raptors, is gone. There's no raptors anymore. All that is the treasure dragon. You'll see it here on the screen. You just come up against what looks like a big treasure dragon statue that's going to offer you some stuff. So, how does the treasure dragon work? Well, the way it works is you'll be presented with a UI at the bottom of your screen that takes over your shop that looks like this. And it says, take all or refresh. And you'll notice here I'm being presented with a tier, a cloak, a static shiv, and 12 gold. I can choose to take that and go neat, or for 1 gold, I can refresh it. And I can refresh it as many times as I want. Now, generally, all the options are relatively balanced within a range here. You can kind of see a bunch of examples here. For the most part, you're going to see, for example, 2 components, a full item, and some other stuff. So you can see here, in this particular case of 5, I got a lot of tiers, but maybe I really, really needed a bow. So I'm going to hold out until I hit that bow, ionic spark, spatula, 5 gold. And so you get to kind of choose the items going into the end game that you need to wrap up your build and finish up your build. Now, there are a few quote-unquote high rolls, but these high rolls are actually meant to be relatively balanced as well. So, for example, here you can see the 3 Thieves Gloves. You know, if you went into this round going, man, I really need a sword to finish my Infinity Edge, but now there's this 3 Thieves Gloves choice, you have to make a trade-off. And so that's kind of the interesting thing here. We're hoping this will add a lot of skill to finish out your end game. No more of this, like, I'm running mages and I dropped 2 swords and a cloak. This sucks. Because you get to actually choose how to finish off your build.
Yep, and as Mort mentioned earlier in the other mechanic slide, it's like you have 9 item components when you get here, basically, which means that if you take some of the other options like 3 Thieves Gloves or other things that aren't just 4 item component value, you're giving up 4 item components in that way. So there's balance around there where, like, you get a high roll, you kind of still have to make a decision. You want to take it because it's super fun, and then but that, like, when you take it, you're giving up this other thing that also adds power to your board, so that you aren't really like way ahead of the other players who also got the 4 item components and are able to build like the best in slot for their carry and things like that. So yeah, a lot of decision making here, and it's really interesting, when you weigh out, like, should I spend another gold to re-roll, or should I just take this as good enough, that kind of thing. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, a common one is like, I went in knowing I need a glove to finish off my last whisper, and then I see a glove, but the full item is something I didn't need, like a static shiv. Do I keep rolling for another glove to try to get a better middle item, or do I just take the glove now and wrap it up? A lot of fun decision making like that here.
Yeah, and sometimes you roll twice from there and you get the perfect like full item for your tank too, and you're like, oh my, yes, Mortdog, thank you, and it feels really good.
Yep, cool. So that's the treasure dragon. Should be pretty cool. What else do we have to talk about? Yes, items. So we have went through and changed a lot of items, and in addition, they're radiant items. We did a whole big balance pass to try to make some of them a little healthier, a little more flexible. So I'm going to kind of go over the highlights here and not really touch on the big ones here. So the big ones of note on this slide here are Archangels. Should be a much healthier item now. Instead of being like 0 AP and then 30 and then like stacking up very slowly until it's only good in the end game, it now actually starts with a bunch more AP. So it's actually kind of comparable to Death Cap and should be not as big of a trade-off in the early stages of fights. So that one should be good. Bloodthirster is now Omnivamp. It has been lowered, but it is Omnivamp now, which means you can put a Bloodthirster on like an AP caster and it's okay. In fact, it's actually quite good sometimes if they have high health and you want that % health shield. It's actually kind of a more selfish Gunblade basically now. Bramble Vest got a little bit of a nerf. Blue Buff got a little bit of a nerf. Chalice is another one. The Radiant version is now Omnivamp. You're basically going to see we got rid of all the physical steel and magic steel, and it's now all just Omnivamp. And then Deathblade got a tiny nerf. But yeah, that's it for this slide. Kent, any follow-ups?
Yeah, just one highlight is Bloodthirster, like turning into Omnivamp makes it really fun to think about, or like made it really interesting to think about, when you want Gunblade, Bloodthirster, or Hand of Justice, it's like you get a shield from Bloodthirster, so maybe you even throw this on like a really tanky unit who doesn't like necessarily deal that much damage. You get to make decisions around that rather than like, this is definitely going on an AD backliner. Becomes a lot more interesting that way.
Yeah, it's really good on Shyvana, actually, of all champions.
Yep.
All right, continuing on. One of the biggest changes here, Dragon's Claw. Dragon's Claw got a bit of its magic resist remove and its damage removed. So we tried the damage thing in Gizmos and Gadgets. What we found is that, blue buff casters basically killed themselves on it. It was very frustrating. That's all gone now. Instead, if you remember VIP Leona and the way she worked, where the more people targeting her, the more health regen she got, that's what's basically been added here. So every 2 seconds, the holder regenerates 1.5% of their maximum health for each enemy targeting them. This is pretty cool, and it's actually very, very good in the early game. If you have a cloak start and get a Dragon Claw early, you can make a tank that is very hard to kill in the early stages. So this item now shouldn't just be an end game item, should actually be pretty good. And then for flavor, we've also added that if the holder is a dragon, the item is 20% stronger. So just a little fun there, and I think, again, this can make, I think Dragon Claw Itis, for example, very strong.
Yeah, we had it added this health regen to help with the early game, make it really slammable, as Mort said. But then late game, you still have this massive amount of MR, this 120 MR to make your unit really tanky, basically, in general. So Brambles, Dragon Claw, Warmog, still an amazing combo. Your unit gets super tanky, and also the Warmog synergizes with this Dragon's Claw, so you just have this solo frontline tank. It's really pretty great.
Cool. Other callouts on this slide, Giant Slayer. The health threshold has gone up a lot because there's a lot of health in this set. Our baseline is basically a 2-star dragon with no items. So I think the weakest 2-star dragon has 2,200 health. So you need 2,200 health to get into that range. But if you do, that's when you get that damage. It's also been nerfed a bit because that percent damage amp is just so strong, trying to bring down some of the power of the outlier items. And we didn't want everyone feeling like they had to build a Giant Slayer every game. And then Hand of Justice is the only other one to call out here. Very small adjustment, but basically it always used to give you some Omnivamp and some AD and AP, but the divide between them was a little wide, and so we shrunk that a bit. So now you're guaranteed at least 15% Omnivamp, and so it should make it an okay option for the people who really need Omnivamp on their champions.
Yep, nothing to add.
Cool. Continuing on, Gunblade is another one that became Omnivamp. Cool. Last Whisper got a pretty big change. It's no longer 70% armor pen, it's only 50%. So quite a bit weaker this set, but it shouldn't be quite so hard countery to high armor builds. But it will now proc on just any physical damage, not crits, meaning you don't have to always build the IE Last Whisper build. There can actually be some more interesting builds there. Morello, as you know, right at the end of set 6, we nerfed this item in half. The big reason is with all these dragons, with all these high health, it turns out percent health true damage is really good when your target has 4,000 health. It just wasn't okay. So the burn has been cut in half. It was cut in half in set 6. It's now been cut in half across the board. You'll see this on other items like Sunfire later. The max percent burn is now 1%, 2% for Radiant. But in exchange, we did want to make sure the item was at least kind of an okay AP item. And so it gets 20 AP instead of its 10. So just a little bit of an AP boost there. And then, yeah, everything else here is just small adjustments. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing to call out, Radiant Redemption was called Radiant Redemption for no reason, but now it's called Absolution. Really cool name. Biggest buff.
Massive.
Props to Brad. Great name. So
massive. Cool. Continuing on, Spear of Shojin, nothing crazy here. It's like I said, it's all small adjustments here. Radiant Static Shiv goes from 70% MR shred to 50%. Again, we're trying to keep the shreds at 50% max right now. Sunfire, like I said, goes down from 2% to 1%. It does last longer now. It will also refresh the burn if there's no targets. So that's a little bit of a buff, and gets an extra 250 health. So it can still be a pretty decent tank item in addition, just with that anti-heal. Zeke's, Radiant Zeke's is now Omnivamp. And then some Ornn items got a bit of adjustment here. Death Defiance got a bit of a damage reduction nerf. It was making things a little too tanky, but the Omnivamp goes up so that it's actually better than Bloodthirster and Gunblade. And then Anima Visage gets a bit of a nerf because nobody wants to fight a 2-star Shyvana with Anima Visage. I mean, you're going to, but at least it'll be a little less powerful.
Yeah, in general, percentage health this set is just super high. Super powerful because health values are all really high. So kind of across the board, across all these slides, you kind of see how percentage health, max health percent things have been nerfed at least a little bit.
Yep. Cool. All right, so that's it for items. So now I'm going to pass it over to Kent, who's going to take the lead with the section he worked on, which is augments.
All right, augments. Okay. You know, set 6 was the first time we introduced augments. We had a lot of learnings coming out of it. And so while working on this, there were some really clear goals about what to do with augments and what kind of like problems we wanted to solve. So I'll get to those as we approach them. But so going right into it, we're going to give you the augments now at different times, moving from 1, 4, 3, 3, and 4, 6. It's going to now become 2, 1, 3, 2, and 4, 2. So kind of near the beginning of every stage. This not only kind of separates a big event separating from the treasure dragon, but also kind of sets the tone that, like, you know, you go into a stage, you have your time to make your comp transition or whatever change you want to make, and then using that board, whatever you have on the board, those augments will be shown to you to like augment that board even further. You know what I mean? Like you build a board and you're like, I want to get these things to buff them. We also saw that, like, you know, having silver be the normal wasn't that exciting. And also just you'll see later with our trait augments, we kind of like put all of the combat trait augments within gold. Just gold is the new normal. A lot of games we've adjusted the rates so that a lot of games you'll see gold way more frequently now. With this, we also took like an approach to nerf everything a little bit down so that augments aren't influencing the game as much as they used to. And the last thing, we added a augment reroller. So once per game, you have this little button and you can refresh your augment shop. So those 3 options go away forever and you get 3 new options within the same tier. This is not only for, you know, all of you who are watching this are probably super engaged and you're like, I just want better choices. These 3 options are not good for me. They're dead. I'm going to get a better one. So that's what you can use it for. But there's other players who, you know, maybe you want to fish for something new, something more exciting. Like I saw someone play with this prismatic and I want to fish for that prismatic. So I'm going to hit the reroll button. Or just other players who, you know, only have time to play 1 game a day. You don't have time to, like, you don't want to see Celestial Blessing again. So you're like, I'm going to hit reroll and go for something more exciting.
Yeah, only thing I'll add is I think the biggest change here is actually the 4-6 to 4-2. You know, a lot of people were doing their level 8 roll downs at either 4-2 or 4-5, so they would create their end game board and then go into the augment. This is a pretty big shift now because you're going to get your 3rd augment and then do your end game boards, your roll down, and that's going to change things a lot, I think, compared to Gizmos and Gadgets.
Yeah, it'll be exciting, but also at the same time, it's kind of that board ties better into the augment. But yeah, it's gonna be a very different experience at that point in the game.
Yep.
Okay, the next slide. We've removed a bunch of augments. I'm just gonna go through the list real quick. Archangel's Embrace, Backfoot, all 3 tiers. Battle Mage, all 3 tiers. Disintegrator, all 3 tiers. Dominance, 4 score, both golden gifts. High Five, Keepers 1, Keepers 2, Knife's Edge, all 3 tiers, Phalanx, all 3 tiers, Titanic Force, Treasure Trove, all 3 tiers, Weak Spot 2 and Weak Spot 3, but not Weak Spot 1, Woodland Charm, and Underdogs. So some of these here were just like problematic and balance issues or related to having these really high health, Titanic Force and Underdogs, for example. But we also had other augments that just kind of weren't working out. Treasure Trove, Golden Gifts. Players weren't really sure what were in the orbs and weren't too excited about how to use those orbs. 4 score and High Five wasn't that exciting to get an econ augment at, you know, your 2nd or your 3rd. But not only that, they had some problems with dragons, and so we introduced other things to replace them in terms of like novelty and econ. And then just some of the positioning ones. The set has some positioning challenges, as we talked about with Legend earlier. Having so many position challenges kind of in the set, we didn't want to have a lot of other positioning augments like Knife's Edge, Phalanx in the mix also to like make it hard for you to build your board and just becomes this weird mini game. So we took some of these out and introduced some new positioning ones that we'll talk about later. We also added the following new outcomes for possible like tierings. So there's gold, prismatic, gold, prismatic, silver, and prismatic, gold. Just some more different options for you to have a more varied game. You also can't be shown 3 trait-related augment choices in the same armory anymore, kind of like what we did back in set 6 for the econ augments. Feels pretty bad when you're going for something and you get 3 trait related ones, and you're like, oh, I just wanted something generic. Now you'll always have something that's like more generic that you can work with. And then for the Crown Soul adjustment, Mort, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, so this change, if you remember, all the prismatics used to be like +2 emblems, so +2 assassin emblems. And it turns out when you're trying to balance traits, a single augment making you go from like 6 to 8 is just really, really powerful. When the traits are balanced in a way that's such that they're supposed to be fun, it's just too accelerant for one thing to make you go that high. If you look at the data right now, you know, the publicly available data, all the top prismatics are like Debonair and Mutant and things like that. It's too much power. And again, we're trying to bring down the power of augments a bit so that it's not quite as warping in some cases, and you'll see that through some changes later. But the biggest one here is that prismatic trait augments, the crowns and souls, instead of giving 2, they only give 1 now. But in addition, to make them better than their gold versions, they also give 1 full item that really helps the trait. We actually went through and picked the best item we thought would be good for that trait, and a champion to get you into that. So, for example, if you want to start off with Prismatic Ragewing, you might get, you know, the Ragewing emblem, as well as like a Ginsu's to go with like your Xayah, and something like a 3-cost, you know, champion from that pool. So, can feel pretty good. Should be slightly more balanced and not like, well, they just got 2 Debonair emblems, I guess they win the game. So,
yeah. Ultimately, we're like tuning down the power of every single tier, and by doing this change for crowns and souls, they still remain really powerful, but it removes the ceiling kind of, or it brings down the ceiling of what you can achieve with these prismatic augments. So your prismatic games will be less swingy, less about these, you know, super tall verticals, and more about what is more of a standard board, but like has more power on it in different ways.
Yep. The only thing I'll add here is that with the gold prismatic, etc., the things we added there, you'll notice it's a bunch of prismatics. The total number of prismatic games is staying the same. We redistributed these through other prismatics. It was just making sure that the types of prismatic games you could get were more varied. There weren't very many 2 prismatic options. There was a lot of 1 and 3. So this was just to mix that up a bit. But it's not like you're going to be seeing more prismatic games now.
Yep.
Cool.
On the next slide, so the old augments, you'll see, we'll go through all the old augments and talk through the different changes that we made. But I'll go through this quickly. Binary airdrop moved to tier 3, calculated loss. Binary airdrop, really powerful, so you know, something that we had to move up. Calculated loss moved to tier 2, still really strong econ augment, and we've kind of nerfed the power of a lot of the different tiers, and so calculated loss fits perfectly there now. Cybernetic Shell, small nerf. Exiles, kind of an adjustment, longer shield so that it's actually valuable, because at tier 3, the shield often lasted extremely long and then just like fell off without getting full value. First aid kit split into 3 tiers now. Hyper roll renamed to Hustler, moved to tier 2. And now it's a little bit easier to use. You get to make the, you know, you get to hold a little bit more gold if you want to econ, or you can like continue to play for that tempo. So it's a little bit more interesting now. Item grab bag 2 give you an extra Reforger. Jeweled Lotus, small nerf. Makeshift armor, small nerf. March of Progress, nerfed, but you know, in a way, it's like you're still kind of going to be ahead of the lobby up until like level 7, nearing level 8. Then it starts to slow down a lot. The augment was really powerful, and because we did a nerf kind of across the board, this brings it back into a reasonable range. Standing 93, small nerf, Sunfire board, percentage HP, so we nerfed it, but up to duration so that you still get a lot of value from the damage. And the Grievous Wounds, or the anti-heal, Three's Company, nerf to 3 units, Tiny Titans, small nerf, and True Twos reworked to now, instead of getting 2 random 2-star units, or 2 random 2-star 2 costs, you get 2-star 1 costs. The swinginess of this augment was just too huge. Plus, you got 10 gold, which kind of bails you out no matter what, compared to something like Rich Get Richer, which also gives you 10 gold. So instead, you get 2 random tier 1 champions. You still get a bunch of tempo if you get, you know, good ones, and you have 2 gold on top of that. So ultimate value is like 8 gold. It's less than Rich Get Richer, but it gives you the chance to have the tempo, or you can just take it for the gold.
Yep. Only things I'll add here is that generally, like I said, you're seeing nerfs across the board. We're just trying to bring down the power of augments a little bit overall. I think binary airdrop secretly was the one, not even that secretly, but got away with being gold all set. Probably should have been prismatic much sooner, if I'm being honest. Hyper Roll now being Hustler, that's going to be a fun one. I think if you've ever played it before, now it plays differently, so that's going to introduce a new way to play. So I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, otherwise nothing too crazy to note here.
Cool. Next slide. So this third augment comes a lot sooner now. It's on stage 4.2 instead of 4.6. So the golden egg, we had to nerf it to 10 rounds. Otherwise, it just hatches way too early, way too easily. But there is a new mechanic where if you win against another player, the hatch timer goes up by 2 instead of 1. So if you win every single round with this egg, you can hatch it in 5 rounds. Kind of gives you the challenge of like, do I need to make my board stronger to hatch this more quickly? Or can I afford to wait a lot of rounds, greed extra hard, and like go for that first place? But on top of that, because it does hatch earlier in general, even with this increased timer, we reduced the value of the loot tables and updated the loot table for set 7. And that 3 Infinity Force option didn't end up being as exciting for a lot of players, especially when you're playing something like an AP comp. So it's been changed to 1 Infinity Force, 1 Anima Visage, and 1 Zhonya's Paradox to allow for more flexibility. This still comes with Nico's, gold, removers, and all that stuff. Wise spending, really strong augment, doesn't need this gold to be good. So we're taking out the 4 gold. It just gives you EXP as you reroll from now. Rich get richer. So these two on the right, it says only shows up on 1.4, and we'll go into this in a little bit more detail later. But basically, Rich Get Richer and Windfall, they have different tiers within themselves, but they're kind of the same tier. Hard to explain without showing you the other slides, but basically, Rich Get Richer shows up on 1.4, gives you 10 gold. Windfall shows up on 1.4, gives you 20 gold.
Yep. I think Windfall, let's have that milk debate. I think it might end up being nerfed a little bit more here, but we'll see. Windfall at 20 for now should be fine. And then the golden egg is one that, honestly, we're just going to keep a really close eye on. We want to try this win mechanic, see how that works, but we also don't want this augment to be like the insta-pick win augment either. So we'll keep a very close eye on this. And if we have to, we'll lower the value a little bit. But hopefully there should be a way to make it work while still offering it at 4.2.
Yep, definitely. We want to keep it exciting, but, it doesn't have to, like, if players are just taking this and, always winning with it and winning combat and just hatching it really quickly, we'll definitely react quickly to it.
Cool.
All right, next is the new augments. So this is all of the new silver augments. You'll see a bunch of hearts here, and we're not going to go through every single one, but we'll pick out a couple that are more interesting, kind of highlight them. I think one I really want to talk about, AFK, really different experience for the beginning of the game. It only shows up on 2.1. When you take it, your shop disappears. You can't touch your units. You basically can't do anything, except for, like, you can move your items. You can do something there. But, like, other than that, you can't really do anything. You're essentially AFK. And then after this is all over, 3 rounds, you go to carousel, you come back, boom, you get your shop back and everything, and you gain 20 gold. So it should be a very different experience, especially for those who you want to open fort, but you're kind of like now forced to open fort and you can't really play around how you want to move your board. Should be an interesting experience.
Yeah, the one I want to call out here, because Kent and I have a bet as to whether or not this is good or not, is Late Game Specialist. Now, I won't tell you who thinks it's good and who doesn't, but Late Game Specialist, when you reach level 9, you get 40 gold. So when you take it, at a certain point, doesn't do a whole lot, but if you run one on the Soju Special, you get a big reward and get a ton of gold to help you reroll and find those 5 costs. So should be interesting. So let us know what you think of that one.
Yep. Oh yeah, one more on the slide just to call it preparation. Units on your bench gain 5 attack damage and ability power every round up to 20. This is like a little stat counter on your bench, kind of encourages you to hold units on your bench and play them a little bit later. So they're preparing for battle.
Nice.
As we go into the next slide, the gold, just want to highlight one of our goals for this for these augments, basically, is when we released set 6.5 Neon Knights, we released a lot of new augments, but a lot of them kind of had a similar like trigger. Like we had Battle Mage, like Knife's Edge. They kind of felt similar, even though they had different. Even though they were different. With set 7 Dragonlands, what we're trying to bring here is these new augments should kind of encourage you to play the game a little bit differently, kind of reward you for doing something that you don't normally do. And so, for example, preparation or AFK from the last slide, those are ones that kind of make you think about the game a little bit differently. There's still obviously going to be ones that are easier to play around, less of a challenge, or just kind of repeat triggers of what you've seen in the past. But there's also going to be a lot of new ones that kind of warp your game and make this game feel different, more transformative, basically. So yeah, this is a slide of tier 2 augments. Another one of our big frameworks was basically all the combat trait ones are going to be in this gold tier. We didn't want, we wanted it to be still like powerful enough to be exciting, but we didn't want it to also like make it feel like you had to take it for the comp. So just as an example, like when you were playing Yordles and you took so small and it was a silver tier, it's just like, well, of course I take this because this is a silver augment and it gives you so much power. But if we nerfed it to a silver tier's level, it just would be way too weak and not satisfying. So instead we bumped it up to tier 2. And so that's kind of what we did here with a lot of these, with all of these trait augments.
Yeah. I think a lot of this, going over each one's going to be hard because you haven't really played with the traits much and how they interact with the traits. But definitely some cool ones to check out there. Devastating Charge is a lot of fun. I think we have to talk about Dragon Alliance and Horde, which I'll let you do in a second, Kent. But first, let me call out the other ones. Pandora's Bench is a really fun one where you get 3 slots on your bench that every turn will reroll champs at the same cost. Really good if you want to try to like 3-star a certain champion. Also, like the 8-cost dragons will only reroll into other 8-cost dragons. So there's a pretty narrow field that you can reroll from that feels fun. And then the other one I want to call out here is Better Together. Aura items that buff your team have their effects increased by 33%. Gain Locket of the Iron Solari. You'll see on the item tooltips, there's actually tags now that will say Aura item or Damage item. So you'll actually know which items work with Better Together. So things like Chalice, if you want to go your full, Keck Cone build, you can get that going. But yeah, that's some fun ones. So Kent, real quick, tell them about Dragon Alliance and Horde.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys watched that video with Witty where he said, that first like set 7 look video, basically, it was like, you can play only one dragon, but there may be ways to augment this. But basically, if you have one of these augments, you can now play as many dragons as you like. The dragon trait remains active, so you still get, the 600 health, you still get the 3-piece origin or +3 origin. And on top of that, your dragons now gain additional armor, magic resist for Alliance, or attack damage and ability power for Horde. So you can only have one of these, but when you have one of these, your board can transform into a vastly, vastly different shape, and you get to make the decision: do you want to play 2 dragons, 3, 4? If you have enough Tactician's Crowns, you want to play all 7. So yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah, that's a really fun one to make. Like, if you ever want to get the full dragon fantasy, that's the augment. Make some pretty cool boards. So.
Yep. One more I want to call out: Last Stand. The first time you would die, instead drop to 1 health.
Oh, this one.
Mort loves this one.
No, I hate this one. I hate this one.
After this effect triggers, your units gain 200 health, 20 armor and MR, and 20% Omnivamp. They turn Super Saiyan. They get ready to clutch it out. So basically, it prevents your first death. It's a Guardian Angel for your Tactician, and after it triggers, all your units get super strong. They get tankier and everything, and you can try to make that comeback.
Yeah, the idea here is, imagine you're 80 health and you see this augment. You're basically you don't have an augment until you get all the way down to 1 health, but then you have a very powerful augment that is almost prismatic level. So,
yeah.
Cool.
Yep, should be fun.
All right, next slide.
Yep, next slide. All of these are related to traits, but with these, like as I mentioned earlier, basically we don't want everything to just be like, oh, I take this when I'm playing the vertical. Kind of want to make it so that sometimes you play maybe in the middle, maybe you only play the 2-piece, or maybe you don't play the trait at all. For example, Mage Conference in the middle there. After combat with the player, a random mage portals onto your bench, gain a Lilia. You don't even need mage active. So it's like, you take this, you just get random 1 to 3 or Zoe gold per round. Do you want to use this as an Incon augment? You can. Or do you want to play like 3 mage? Or maybe you just want to 2-star your Zoe, and so you're just trying to get lucky and get that like 2-star Zoe using Mage Conference. Other than that, there's also ones that are like, one that I want to call out too is party favors. Revel, you launch firecrackers every combat, but this one, if you can launch 100 total firecrackers in your game, you get a special prize with stuff in it, with loot. So it's exciting. There's kind of like, with these augments, there's trait augments. There's some combat ones that help you with combat. There's some like Mage Conference and Party Time, these kinds of things that do something different. They give you, or Party Favor, sorry. They give you something outside of the game that like translates to combat power in gold or items, but they do something more unique for you.
Yeah, there's a bunch of fun ones here, and I think Kent and the team did a really creative job here. The only one I'm going to call out here, just because I think it's so creative, is reckless spending. If you purchase both XP and a shop refresh during the planning phase, so you have to spend 6 gold during the planning phase, Shimmer Scale champions gain 30% damage for the next combat phase. So it's a augment that costs 6 gold to use, but it's very powerful. So, which kind of fits the Shimmer Scale where you have a bunch of gold, but then there's also like, I have to get rid of 6 gold, which means my items get weaker. It's a fun one. So, and there's a bunch of fun ones in here. Pause the video, take a look at the list, and enjoy it. So,
yep. All right, next slide. Okay, so now at Prismatic, we can talk about the Windfall and Rich Get Richer changes, which is basically we created Windfall, Windfall Plus, and Windfall Plus Plus. They all show up at different points in the game. So Windfall shows up on 1-4, Windfall Plus on 3-2, and Windfall Plus Plus on 4-2. It says gain 20 gold, gain 30 gold, gain 40 gold. A lot more straightforward there, and a lot little, like not as much text as the, it depends on how many augments you have, 1 equals this and all that stuff. So it should be a lot cleaner. With Prismatics, a couple of highlights here. I think a lot of players saw this in the teaser video, but Cruel Pact changed from what used to be called Sacrificial Pact. Buying XP costs 4 health instead of gold. So this one, we're going to keep a really close eye on this one because it can do some really transformative things to the game. If you get this on early in the game and just like level to 6, level to 7, you're kind of way ahead, but you're also way down in health. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see how players play with this. Another one to call out, I think is pretty cool, is Living Forge. Gain a random or an item now and after every 10 player combats. So when you take this on 2-1, you get a random Ornn item. It's a lot weaker than a normal Prismatic, but once you get to 4-1, you get a second Ornn item, and now it's stronger than a normal Prismatic. And if you can survive to 6-1, this is even more value, and you get 3 Ornn items total, which is like way more power than a single Prismatic.
Yeah, the 2 I want to call out here are Ancient Archives. We did mention now that all the crowns only give 1 emblem, but Ancient Archives gives you 2 Tome of Traits. If you get lucky and high roll, this is the one way you can still get 2 from a Prismatic. So definitely check that out. But more often than not, it ends up being like one of 2 different traits, which can be kind of fun. It's kind of the baseline now of Prismatic power, which is why a lot of the crowns end up kind of weaker as far as making 1 trait vertical. And then the other one we have to talk about is Think Fast. I think Think Fast is going to be probably the most controversial augment here, because for the first time it has a skill part to it, right? Like, frankly, if you're slow on the reroll here, don't take Think Fast. It's going to be rough. But for about 45 seconds, you have infinite rerolls. There is a slight delay to like prevent botting and stuff like that, and the rerolls don't work with anything else. So for example, if you have wise spending and you see this, nope, you're not getting infinite XP. Doesn't work with Astral shops. It's basically like they're almost like fake rerolls. But a lot of the way I like to think about this augment is, as long as you have the gold, it's like 3-star a unit of your choice. Take this at 2-1, and if you're fast enough, get a 3-star Aatrox or get a 3-star Nidalee. You can do some pretty cool stuff with it. We've seen it like 4-2. You can get a 3-star Olaf, stuff like that. That's kind of the way I've been interpreting it. Which, when you say that out loud, it's still really good. It just has a skill gap to it. So give it a try. Let us know what you think. Definitely one of the more unique ones here.
Yeah, I think this one's going to have a weird like LP curve as people like start to learn the set more. It becomes easier to use. Personally, like, I am not fast. I have boomer APM, and so this is a hard augment for me. But I mean, you can take it on 2-1. We give you 8 gold, and it instantly goes into your pocket. So like, because the 1-cost odds are so good at 2-1, you can actually 3-star some things and get close to 3-starring like more than 1 unit. So it can actually be a lot of value even on 2-1. So lots of different ways to play with it depending on what part of the game you take it. So yeah, it should be fun.
Yep. Cool. All right, I'm going to take back over. Just a couple things left to go through. Double Up got a bunch of changes. The team's working really hard on it. We don't talk about it on the slide here, but it'll be using the official metallic rank thing, so you can get Challenger and Double Up. That'll be pretty cool. Reinforcements now retain their health, mana, item, and positive buff status when reinforcing. All positive buffs are retained, all negative buffs are removed, so should be cleaner. All buffs, items that manipulate unit stats do not apply their benefits when they trigger during the time. Fancy talk for basically saying it now works the way it should. There are now 2 types of Runes of Allegiance. Lesser Rune of Allegiance that can only send tier 1, 2, or 3 champions, and Rune of Allegiance. This is to hopefully bring down some of the crazy swinginess that we're seeing in Double Up. You get the Rune of Allegiances at different stages. In addition, attempting to open an orb containing a champion given via Rune of Allegiance will now never accidentally convert to gold, so that'll feel good. The order that players are released during the carousel is also different now. Players are still released in pairs, but the pairs released now have members of different teams. And so you can kind of see here on the screen here, it's like the 4th and 3rd place team get a member. The 2nd and 1st place team get a member. So now it's not so disadvantageous to be in 1st place in Double Up. So just a couple quality of life changes there that should hopefully make Double Up even better as it goes in and has its actual competitive ladder this time.
Yeah, the Rune of Allegiance change is so great because, I mean, for coming from a balance perspective, it's like, now we don't have to, now it's not 4 cost 3 stars every single game, you know, and we can balance around that. So
yep,
should be good.
Cool. Hyper Roll also got a few small changes. Passive gold income has been increased starting at round 5-2 to account for the increased dragon costs. Player damage, health loss during stage 5 has been reduced from 4 to 2, so it won't spike up quite as early. The Treasure Dragon round happens at 4-2, which means the 3rd augment is before that, now at 7-1. And then we remove several XP-based econ and augment, like a lot of the augments that don't work in Hyper Roll have been removed to fit Hyper Roll's pacing.
Yep, and then also some of the other augments that are like can be fit. So for example, Cruel Pact can't be used here, but like the Golden Egg now hatches faster in Hyper Roll, so you can actually play with the Golden Egg in Hyper Roll. So there are adjustments like that.
Yep. All right, and that's it. We did it, Kent. We made it to the end. It only took a little more than an hour, but
oh my god.
Yep, that's it. And like I said, this is the light touch. This is, you know, a very light introduction to all the stuff you're seeing. We could have talked for hours on the details, the crazy builds, the combinations, the traits, stuff like that. But yeah, this is Dragonlands. Comes to PBE tomorrow. Should be a blast. So yeah.
I'm very excited to see this go to PBE, to see everyone's reactions. You know, first time kind of like being really involved in set development on the augment side and kind of seeing everything. So it's gonna be cool seeing players like play with this stuff. And I'm personally like, I think this set has so many cool mechanics and traits, units, augments, kind of everywhere. So excited to see like players experiment with this too, come up with stuff that we didn't even think of, and then make us have to like balance around that. But you know, it'll be fun.
Yep. I guess the last thing I'll say is, as we go into PBE, the thing to remember is it is PBE. We know it's not quite perfectly polished. It's not balanced. I'm just going to call it out now. There's a lot of balance work to do. We did our best, but you're going to play more games in the first hour than we did in the entire development because there's so many players. So give us that feedback during PBE. That's what it's there for. We'll be iterating every day up until launch. So yeah, a lot to do, but we're not quite there yet. But this is exciting because this is when you all get to try it for the first time, and it's looking really great. So
yeah, as always, hit us with the feedback. I know Mort personally reads like so much feedback, and I try to read as much as I can too. So, you know, we're here listening. We care about what you think, and we want to make the game as great as you guys want the game to be.
Yep. All right. That's going to do it for us. On behalf of the entire TFT team, we can't wait for you to try Dragonlands. It's going to be awesome. PBE should be up tomorrow sometime in the afternoon. Honestly, if you plan for like 4 p.m. PST, you're probably safe, but we'll see. Things go crazy. So, all right. That's going to do it for us. Until next time, enjoy Dragonlands.
See ya.